Good morning. It is Tuesday, January 9th, and here to start this week's reading vlog. As I mentioned when I was wrapping up the last reading vlog, I'm about halfway through Master of One by Jada Jones and Danny Bennett, and this one's definitely been fun so far. I'm definitely hoping to finish this one as my next physical priority. I am also listening to the audiobook Unscribed when I'm reading this one. And my next physical priority is probably going to be Better Than Perfect by Simone Elkless. I don't know too much about this one. It's a contemporary romance, and I think I mentioned this in my TBR when I filmed that I randomly got this one when I ordered the Owl Crate edition of The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue off of someone on eBay. They also just randomly sent this as an extra little thing. And so I was like, why not give it a try and just see if I like it, and if I don't, I can always DNF it. But, you know, might as well give it a try and see what I think. Maybe I'll love it. Who knows? So it's probably going to be my next physical priority. On audio, I'm currently listening to The Grid by Gretchen Baki, and this is a nonfiction about the electrical grid system in the United States, how it developed. So she's currently talking about the history of the electrical grid system, how it came to be, how it is today, what it was like at first, and what inventions along the way helped bring the electrical grid to what it is today. And then she's also going to be going into what changes need to be made, what the future of the grid is going to look like, and what kinds of new technology it's going to need to take into account, and so what changes are going to need to be made to kind of move into a cleaner energy future. So it's definitely interesting so far. I'm having a good time listening to it. I don't know what my next audio priority is going to be. It is entirely possible that I could start Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. I do have all three of these on audio actually as one audio book, and so I might listen to Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. We'll see if I want to try to get into that one. I know Shadow and Bone is also currently on sale on Audible for a sale that they're having. I don't know how long the sale is going to last, so I don't know if it'll still be going on by the time this is posted. So I'm considering buying the audiobook of Shadow and Bone. It's an Audible exclusive, so I'm considering getting that one. The ebook is also Unscribed, so I was thinking about just reading Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo on the ebook Unscribed, but I might also get the audiobook. We'll see. Anyway, so that might be my next, one of those two might be my next audiobook. I'm not sure, but I will update you once I make a decision and check in on how my reading is going later in the week. Oh hey, it is Monday night, January 15th. And I'm here to wrap up this vlog. I meant to check in this weekend and with better lighting, but you know, is what it is. I did finish Master of One by Jada Jones and Danny Bennett. This one ended up being meh okay for me, and I thought I was starting to get into it. It was definitely entertaining enough for me to keep reading. I never wanted to DNF it, but I for some reason wasn't super compelled or drawn into the world in the end, and not super compelled by the characters. I just found that I didn't really feel too much about things that were happening to the characters. The world, it's not that I couldn't quite picture it, but I was never particularly captured by the world. And there definitely was some interesting stuff happening. There's definitely some fun, snarky banter at times, and that usually draws me in. I love snarky characters, I love snarky banter, but just didn't, I don't know, for some reason just didn't quite work for me in this one. So again, this one follows Rags, who's a thief and is forced to steal some Fey relics on behalf of royalty in this world. He's there to steal a Fey relic on their behalf, and you find out that you need to kind of collect multiple parts, and this relates to a whole set of politics that is happening in this world that they kind of get caught up in. And anyway, so it's like relatively interesting premise, and there were definitely some interesting parts, but I don't know, there's not a ton else to say for me. It just kind of meh. Like, again, I didn't want to DNF it, but will I be super compelled to read the next one? Probably not. I mean, who knows? But I'm not going to feel a super urgent desire to read the next one. You know, it's not going to be what I think about too much. And I don't know. It is what it is. I thought this one was a standalone actually, but it's definitely not. Anyway, you know, as I said, is what it is. I then did actually finish The Grid by Gretchen Baki. If you are at all interested in the US electrical grid system and the history of it, how the technology changed over time, and how that affected the actual way the grid was built and structured and worked. If you're interested in the history of the politics and regulations surrounding the grid system and electricity distribution in general, super interesting, and how that relates to the different players, what needs to change moving forward to combat climate change and integrate a whole set of new renewable technologies into the grid system. And anyway, if you're at all interested in that subject, would highly recommend this book. I thought it was really well written and well researched and just super interesting. I really enjoyed the writing style. I thought she just told a really compelling story throughout the book, and yeah, very interesting. So I finished those later in the week. I think maybe early on Saturday. I was done with both of those. I then turned to Better Than Perfect by Simone Elkelis and ended up DNFing this at under 100 pages. And I could so this one follows a couple of perspectives. The guy is the one that you're introduced to first, and he is getting kicked out of a boarding school for just doing dumb things. And he, because of this, is actually going to be living with his stepmom. His father is deployed and had recently married his stepmom, but he's actually now going to have to live with her and isn't very excited about this. She ends up deciding to move the family to basically move back in with her family to figure some stuff out. And the female love interest is this stepmom's younger sister. So literally the guy love interest is the female love interest's step-nephew, which is a choice. I didn't particularly like him right off the bat. It's a first person, so you're following their thoughts as they go through this, and he refers to his stepmom as a bimbo, and I was like, alright, cool. And then there were a couple of other things that made me just go, WTF. The female love interest is on the football team, and she hasn't been in touch with her sister for quite a while, and so her sister doesn't know, the stepmom, the older sister, doesn't know that her younger sister is on the football team, and just asks if she's a lesbian because she's a kicker on the football team. No other context, nothing else brought up about that, just asked if she's a lesbian, and she's like, no. I was like, that was unnecessary. There's also a point where the guy was driving around in a different part of town that was like clearly the bad part of town, and was thinking that everyone looked like they were about to sell him drugs and stuff. And again, just a random offhand thing that is just one random thought, and then it's like, that was unnecessary. What? Why is that in there? And there just were several things like this about the book. I wasn't super interested in any of the characters. I didn't particularly care if they got together. I didn't really care about anything that was happening. The characters just seemed super cliche and one-dimensional to me, and I just didn't want to continue reading ultimately, and so I DNF'd it at 100 pages. You win some, you lose some, And so after that, my hold for Winterkeep by Kristen Kishore came in. So the audiobook that I'm currently listening to is Winterkeep, and I'm a third of the way through this. I'm loving it, but I will talk more about that in next week's vlog. The physical book that I picked up after I DNF'd Better Than Perfect is Silent Spring by Rachel Carson, and I think it's like 100 pages left, because there are quite a few notes and resources at the back and a huge index. So I think it's actually 100 pages that I have left in this one from where I left off after reading part of it in grad school. So I'm just gonna finish this up, and yeah, so that is what I'm currently reading. If you're not familiar with this, this is a classic and pivotal text in the environmental movement here in the United States, and really is, I think, has affected multiple environmental movements around the world, but it particularly pertained to DDT use and talked a lot about the United States. And you know, it was a huge part of galvanizing the environmental movement here. So I wanted to make sure that I actually finished reading this pivotal text in environmental history. So yeah, that is the end of this week's vlog and the rest of my reading for the week. Definitely some ups and downs, but that's okay. And yeah, let me know how your reading week is going. Let me know if you have any thoughts about any of these books, if you have read them. And I'll be sure to leave my Twitter and Instagram link down below. That's where I like to hang out. I will also leave more resources about how you can support the Black Lives Matter movement, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.